Welcome to the Alien Probe Podcast. Today is April 29th, and I've got Matt Whiting and our guest today, Colin Saunders. Thanks, Colin, for joining in. He's the author of Triangular UFOs of the United Kingdom. We appreciate you coming on there, Colin. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thanks, Doug, and Matt. And thank you for inviting me onto your podcast to chat about the book
Absolutely.
and about my own sighting experience.
Yeah, we look forward to hearing about your experiences.
Yes, sir.
Okay, shall we go straight into it?
Let's do it.
Okay. Before I go to the actual sighting, I'll give you a quick rundown of my career history and why I believe I make such a good witness. So basically, I have been a draftsman all of my life, electrical design draftsman. I'm 64 now. I'm still drawing. So I've spent my whole life doing drawings and computer-aided design. And I've worked notably in the aircraft industry. You have to excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold coming on.
Oh,
But I've worked on the European Airbus in Germany, spent a year in Hamburg. And then I also spent 2 years in Sweden working for Saab Aerospace on a civilian aircraft. And I've also spent some time in New Zealand and also, importantly, a year in Aberdeen working for Chevron Petroleum. And that was interesting because there was the odd offshore trip that I made and they sort of drilled it into you. You had to get all the information correct because once you're back on shore, you need to draw up what you've seen. And if you've got something wrong, you can't just go back and look at what you've missed. So that sort of training became invaluable on the night of the encounter with the UFO. Because, obviously I took in all of the detail as much as I could that night. And then as soon as I got home, started making drawings of the craft.
nice.
Also, notably, along the way, I did become AutoCAD User of the Year in 1992 here in the UK. So that shows I've got a lot of CAD experience and drafting experience in general. So the models I've built, and eventually the one I'll show you, are basically an exact copy of what we saw that night.
Wow.
Nice.
Matt wants a copy of that, by the way. You're going to have a mass produced
Yeah.
so we can get one?
Yeah, we'll be putting them on eBay. So, to go to the sighting, it was the 31st of March, 1999. We're going out for a bar meal. It was my mother-in-law's birthday. She was 72 that day. And there was 2 carloads. My wife was driving one of the cars with my mother-in-law and myself and my daughter. So we was in that car that my wife was driving. And then my brother-in-law, who lived next door to the mother-in-law, he had got a French partner and her grandparents were over from France and they were coming out for a bar meal with us as well. So the 8 of us set off in 2 vehicles and we went to a tiny village in the UK countryside called Paleton. It's in the county of Warwickshire. We lived at Hinckley in Leicestershire at the time, but very close to the Leicestershire-Warwickshire border. So we'd had the bar meal and then we come to leave. So like I said, my wife was driving. My mother-in-law was sitting in the front seat on the passenger seat on the near side. I was sitting behind my mother-in-law and my daughter was in the back with me. As we left, I remember looking round and seeing my brother-in-law helping the old French people into the Range Rover that they was in. And she was quite old and frail, so she was struggling to get on board. But I thought, well, they'll catch us up on the way, which they didn't, but we'll come to that. So we left and drove through the countryside, and it was about a mile and a half to the junction of the Fosse Way. Now, the Fosse Way is an old Roman road, apparently built on ley lines, and a short distance from where we turned onto it is a place called High Cross, where the Watling Street, another Roman road, passes where they join. It's called High Cross, like I say. So the intersection of 2 Roman roads and 2 ley lines, because I know quite a few people are into ley lines, but that's by the side, really. So we came up to the Fosse Way, and somebody said, "Oh, we're turning onto the Fosse now." And my daughter laughed and said, "Oh, there's been talk of headless horsemen down here." So we all had a bit of a chuckle, and we said, "Yeah, we'll keep our eyes open for him then." And as soon as we turned the corner, there were the lights, half a mile away by the side of the road. The bright red lights and the white light mingled in, and they were flashing away like you've never seen before. Absolutely incredibly bright. And it's exactly half a mile. So I went back the next day and measured the distance. So we drove towards these lights, talking about them, saying, what on earth could there be? There's too many lights for an airplane and too many for a helicopter. It'd be too low for an airplane anyway. These were right by the side of the road. So we drove to the lights and we pulled up once we got next to them. Now, I would say they were no more than 100 feet away. Now, I always use the analogy that a friend of mine's got a narrowboat that I steer on the canal. It's 70 foot long. So I know the distances. So when I say 100 feet, I mean 100 feet. I could have hit it with a cricket ball. It was so close.
Wow.
But at this point, amazingly enough, there was no craft. It was just lights. And as we stopped, like I say, more or less underneath these lights, there were 4 big red lights on the back, and there was at an angle to the earth. They weren't flat with the earth. I'll show you on this. This is the larger model that we'll come to eventually. But basically, the craft was tilted at an angle like this, or the lights were at an angle. Yeah. There was no craft, and I was staring at this light here, the end light, and it seemed to have like a crisscross effect in the light lens, but it wasn't etched into it. It wasn't a material. It looked like it was a side effect of the light coming out. It was like a grid, like a crisscross effect, coming from the beam that was actually coming out from the red light. But like I say, there were 4 of these in a line, tilted about 30 degrees. Now I could see a smaller red light off to one side, and a little bit of mist and some white light all mingled in. But so bright, I mean, it was fantastic to look at. And I love firework displays, things like this. Now, as I'm staring at this end light and looking at this grid effect, I noticed that the sky all of a sudden started to ripple around the lights. And that's when I had the thought, there's something there. It's not just lights. It's not just balls of light suspended in the air. There's actually something around the lights. And at that point, it decloaked, just like Star Trek. The Klingons decloaked the ship. It was just like that, right in front of us. It was absolutely incredible. And it became metallic. Now, as it materialized, I noticed, because I was looking at this area here, I noticed on this wingtip here, the little cloud formed along it, like vaporization on the corner. And at that point, once it became solid, it floated up in the air like this.
Oh, wow.
It floated up like a submarine underwater. And the important thing here, like, it was the top surface. Not many people get to see the top of a triangle.
Right.
Everybody sees the bottom.
Always.
But we were looking at the top of this triangle. Now, if you look at the surface, we've tried to replicate it on this model. The surface looked like it was liquid. It looked like it was alive.
Right.
Liquid was running up and down the surface. But the beams that were interlocking on the surface were solid. They were not shimmering. So it wasn't a heat effect or electromechanical effect that was causing the liquid effect on the surface. It was definitely a liquid. And it looked like it was running from top to bottom continuously, like in a cycle. And the best way to describe it would be like a lake at night when the moonlight's shining on it and it's got a slight ripple and it's catching some of the peaks and troughs of the waves. It looked like that on the surface with the beams on top. It looked like it was alive. It looked organic, but obviously manufactured. So as it reared up in the air in front of us, completely filling the field of vision, I had 3 thoughts. The first one was aliens exist. That was mine, enough.
Yeah, right.
The second one was that abductions must take place. And the third one, that this explained things from history that we don't understand, because I got the feeling that these guys have been around for a long, long time. So at this point then, once it's reared up in front of us, well, to the side, my mother-in-law, myself and my daughter are staring at this craft. But my wife, who was the driver and had stopped the car, decided to pull into a gateway that was to one side because she was worried about having an accident, even though there was no traffic whatsoever. So she put her hazard flashes on, pulled forwards, and there was this large hedge, and it blocked the view momentarily. And I thought to myself, if it's going to go, it's going to go now. We burst into the gateway, we jumped out. Sure enough, it had gone. And there was no smell of any aviation fuel. It was extremely quiet. You could hear a pin drop. But more importantly, in the distance, there was this craft going away with 4 red lights on the back of it. But it was enormous. It was like the size of a football pitch. Now, I've worked in the aircraft industry, and I've been to a few air shows. So I've seen quite a lot of aircraft, and this is the biggest thing I've ever seen flying in the sky. And we stood there and looked at that and thought, that is just so weird. Initially, I thought the small one had grown into the large one because I knew nothing about UFOs. I had no interest in UFOs whatsoever before the encounter. So it wasn't something that we was looking for. It was just something that occurred. So we watched the large craft going away, and then we got back into the car and drove home, talking about it all the way home. And we got back to the mother-in-law's house, and there's the Range Rover with the French people. They're already there, and they've got them out of the car and they're inside the house having a cup of tea. So they obviously arrived home a while before us, but they never saw us, and they never saw us in the gateway, and they never saw the craft, which was, we don't know how that could have occurred, but because they should have been right behind us, but they saw nothing.
Right.
It was just like it was us at the time. There was no other traffic, no aircraft, nothing. It was just absolutely amazing, incredible. So that was the sighting. That's in 1999, 31st of March. And there is a little bit more to it, but I tend to come back to that.
Yeah.
Rather than doing everything in one shot. But this is what I would call the nuts and bolts of the sighting, because there is a little bit of paranormal activity attached to the sighting.
Yeah.
Which we'll get to. So basically, once we got back then, we started doing drawings and making sketches. And the next day, I started making models. At this point in my career, I was actually working from home. I set my own business up, and I got 3 people working for me, which proved to be a godsend because I couldn't concentrate on work. All I wanted was to draw this craft and then make models of it. So initially, I drew it on the CorelDRAW, got some lovely drawings, and then I printed those and made some paper models. Now, I got in touch with the UFO magazine here in the UK, which used to be, it's no longer going, unfortunately, a guy called Graham Birdsall. Now, he put me in touch with a gentleman called Omar Fowler, who specialised in triangular UFOs. Now, he sent me some information about different sightings around the UK, but one of them was from Belgium, which caught my eye, because when we saw the craft, we only saw the rear at the top with the interlocking lines. Now, the pamphlet that Omar sent to me, there was a view from Belgium. There was a sighting in Belgium where the young guy had seen the underneath of a triangle, and he made this sketch.
Nice.
Now, this has got the interlocking beams raised off the surface again, in relief, exactly the same as I got on the top of ours. So I thought it's just too much of a coincidence.
Right. Yeah.
So I took the Belgium sighting to make the bottom of the craft, but we never actually saw the craft, the bottom of the craft.
Right.
We just saw the rear end and the top. Now, I say that with a little bit of hesitation because when it first materialised, I could see what appeared to be a diamond shape. Now, looking at when I built the craft, I instinctively built it with a flat bottom.
Right.
When I was playing with it one night and I pulled the nose down slightly, you can see the silhouette of a diamond comes into shape.
Yep.
More importantly, what comes into view is this little red light at the front. Because when I was staring at the 4 big red lights at the back in a perfect line, there was one little red light off to one side that was smaller, and it seemed to have a mist around it. And that would then be this one underneath the nose.
Right.
And I realise now, after all these years, that when it materialised, all 3 points, all 3 corners would have had vaporisation on the corners. So when we glimpsed what looked like a diamond shape, we was actually glimpsing just a tiny bit of the underneath, the red light at the front, and the vaporisation around the red light. We saw that just before it then floated up into the air.
Wow.
So it was quite exciting when I realised that. It made sense of the sighting once I tilted the nose down and got this view of the craft. I also, over the years, came up with the idea that trying to figure out why it was at 30 degrees to the earth like that, rather than being straight. And I think I figured it out because by tilting it like that, it was tilting towards us. As we were coming along in the car, it's actually showing more of the underneath, so we get a better view of the lights. Even though there was no craft there at the time, it was just lights, no craft whatsoever, just the lights. But I believe they did that on purpose. That was intentional to grab our attention. So I built a model, my first one, after making a few paper ones and doing a presentation at Omar's UFO group. I then got some dowling, some wooden dowling and some plywood, and made a little triangle and stuck the pictures onto that I got from CorelDRAW, and it looked pretty good. It didn't have the lines raised up on the surface and no lights in it. Now that one got stolen strangely enough, from a van that was parked on my driveway.
Oh.
Somebody broke into my van and stole an old cassette player, which would be worth next to nothing. Even in them days, we were playing CDs back in '99. But why somebody? But the thing was, when I took the van to my friend to be repaired, he said it had been professionally broken into.
Oh, wow.
And he didn't understand why somebody would do that just to pinch a cassette player. Somebody with them skills would be doing more expensive vehicles. But then I come to look for my model, and I know the last time I had it was in the van, and it had gone. It wasn't there, and I never did find it again. Over all these 24 years now, it never turned up. So whoever took the cassette player also took the model. Whether they realised what it was or not, I don't know. It may have been intentional, but it may just be a bit of paranoia. But you know, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not after you.
That's right.
So that led me on to my second model, which I've got here. Now again, this is a plywood model, but this time I've got some flashing lights and a switch.
Right.
All right.
That's cool.
Nice.
And made this one.
Nice.
This was lovely. Yeah, I kept it in my briefcase, and every time I took it out of the briefcase, it would make me shake with excitement. It would just take me back to that night of the encounter.
Very cool.
It was just absolutely marvelous. Then what happened? A friend of mine came along. The model was great, but it hadn't got the lines waved off the surface. And a friend of mine, John Mills, came to me one day and he said he bought a 3D printer and he wanted to experiment and do my UFO. So I thought, great, at last we're going to get the beams on the surface. So he made the first model. This is the one here. And this is a small, like A5 sort of size model.
Right.
And it's got lights, battery pack, and all the rest of it in.
Yeah.
And it's got the raised beams on the surface. But you can see.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which was
Very
great.
nice.
But it wasn't exact. I mean, we were getting there. And when I talked about the craft tilted up towards us, I got John to make me a transparent craft. Okay. So this is how it would have appeared on the night as we drove towards it. This is trying to show how all of the lights, you know, when you put this in a darkened room when you're doing the presentation, it looks fantastic. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Gives you the right
nice.
impression of what it looked like as we drove towards it. So John made me this transparent triangle as well, which was
Very nice.
really nice. So it's brilliant.
All
Still
right.
got
That's
lines on it.
awesome.
But this is how it looked as
wow.
it actually materialized before it became the solid.
Right.
Yeah.
So then I came up with an idea, because I know John had spent some time on this model. I said, let's try and sell some on eBay. And if I sell enough, will you make me a big model with the liquid surface and the silver beams? And he agreed. So we set about selling these little models. He also took a fancy to this flying saucer that I've got behind me.
Right.
So he made one of those as well. He's also made a cigar.
Are they still on eBay? Can we still get it?
The small triangles on eBay, yeah. And I think
Oh, I'm in.
cigars as well, yeah.
Same.
And they're the smaller versions, though, not the larger version.
Cool.
So in the end, we sold enough, and John agreed to build this one. So this is the final version. This is like
Wow.
an A4 size craft.
That's
Now on this,
amazing.
you can see we spend a lot of time and money getting the surface to look like it's a
Right.
light, like liquid.
Raised.
And then we've got the silver beams on top of that.
Yep.
The lights on the back also have even got like a slight grid effect to them
Oh
as
yeah.
well.
Oh,
I see
yeah.
those, yeah.
To achieve. And then the bottom, like I say, is based on the Belgium sighting.
Right.
Now I said to John, once I got the big model, I'll go out and do a couple of presentations. So last year I went to the OLM conference, Outer Limits magazine here in the UK, and I did my presentation, showed people the model, and it went down really well. I always think it's a lot more tangible having a model, something 3D to show people, rather than just stand and talk or show drawings even. You know, the actual model makes it far more tangible. Well, I was chatting to a couple of guys there, the Kinsella twins, very nice gentlemen. One of them had an experience with a triangle, and Philip suggested I write a book. Well, I'd thought about perhaps writing a book, but not until I retire. I'll be retiring soon. I'm 64 now, another year or so. But I thought, yeah, maybe I should start it now. Because over the 24 years, a lot of people have got in touch with me, and I've researched all about triangles, basically. Not just the UK, but triangles around the world, because that's what I saw that night. If I'd have seen a flying saucer, then I'll be researching saucers or cigars. So I decided once I wrote my story up, I then started putting other people's experiences in as well, and then asking for new experiences. And in total, I've got 130 different close encounters with triangles in the UK, which is quite phenomenal, really.
Yeah, there's a lot.
I think the oldest one's 1957, and they come up to date.
Wow.
So that was the impetus for writing the book. But the funny thing is, times are changing a bit now. When I first started doing all of this, I only ever talked about nuts and bolts. But there was a bit of a weird thing happened on the night. So we'll talk about that now.
Yeah, sure.
Because it is becoming more mainstream. So I never used to talk about this, but now I do. I mean, it's not that amazing, but well, to me it is.
Yeah.
So what happened was, if we go back to the night on the 31st of March, as the craft tilted up in the air like this, floated in the air, it was like somebody had got a pair of binoculars and put them in front of my eyes like that, because all of a sudden I could see the craft close up. It was like this close on the joints there. So that was one view. Then the next view was the nose, and it was so close I couldn't see the beams underneath anymore. I could only see the nose.
Right.
And this side view of a central white core, the top and bottom were rolled over like hovercraft skins.
Right.
And where they joined onto this white core, there was no welding, no nuts and bolts, no rivets.
Yeah.
Seams. We would not have been able to see that side view from where we were sitting in the car.
Right.
So this is extra views that I'd got of the craft, which helped me to build the exact model. Now, we got chatting about it the next day, and I was basically convinced that I had an out-of-body experience. That was how I thought I got to see the craft close up. Kept putting other things through my mind. You know, did we actually get out of the car? Did we get closer to it? Did we go on board? None of that, I don't think, occurred. I think it was just somehow I got this out-of-body experience. I started reading books out of the library, trying to do it again, but it couldn't do it. But then what also started to happen, and it started the next day, we started to have some strange things happen. Like, first of all, we had a lot of electrical problems the very next day around the house, with the TV going down on us, a video recorder broke up. The clock started working, electric clock that had never worked. Hard drives on one of the computers went down. All sorts of things. But this was just the start, because then I started to have other paranormal experiences, and these lasted for a couple of years. Some of them were minor ones, and some were a bit more traumatic. So one of them, I'll tell you about. I've listed them. When I was having these odd things happen, I'd write down what occurred and then put the date. So I've put them all into the book in date order. But the most scariest one, and this is the only time I've ever been frightened in this UFO encounter. I know it's going to sound crazy, but here we go. I was fishing.
No.
Down and I was standing in the water in my waders, having a great time because I love fishing. And I could hear some footsteps coming across the field towards me. And I thought, that's a bit unusual. It could be some farm workers down there shooting. So I'll climb up and make myself known to them. So I climbed up onto the riverbank, and this noise is continuing, but there's nobody there. And it's coming towards me, and it's getting closer and closer. And I think, this is a big cat. This cat's going to come for me like a leopard or something.
Right.
So I took this spike out of my rod holder that I used for my umbrella. And my idea was that if it was a cat, I was going to go back down the bank and get it to jump on me and then try and impale it on its own way to come over. I went through my mind that quick, trying to figure out what the best escape route was.
Right.
Excuse me. And it walked towards me, and it was getting louder and louder. And it walked right in front of me from left to right. It couldn't have been more than a few feet in front of me, 4 feet, 6 feet away. Really loud as well, 4 footsteps, not 2, but 4 footsteps. And then it just started to drift away quietly. I tried to flush it out, being a bit brave towards the end, but nothing came out. And I stood there and I thought, that's something you hear about, that's not here. There's something there, but it's not in our world as it is at the moment.
Right.
And that was the time, Doug and Matt, that I decided that the UFO was interdimensional, because I've been having quite a few experiences since the UFO, and I had nothing prior to the UFO. So for like the first 40 years of my life, nothing.
Yeah.
Then the UFO, and then quite a lot of stuff over the next 18 months, 2 years. And then it calmed down after that. I still see bits now and again, but those early days were quite amazing. And as an engineer, I just found it absolutely mind-blowing. my
Yeah.
whole life.
It's incredible. Wow.
So I clung to this theory of the out-of-body experience, and I quite like the idea because it meant you could live without your body. So maybe there'd be life after death. I thought that'd
Right.
be good.
Right.
But excuse me, the UFO magazine, Graham Birdsall and Russell Callahan, they put on some fantastic conferences in Leeds in the north of England, and I met quite a few interesting people there. And I was introduced to like Stanton Freeman, Dr. Roger Lear, Stephen Greer, but more importantly, I met Bud Hopkins, the late Bud Hopkins.
Yep.
And after his talk, he was taking questions in a private room, like, so there's a queue of us going chatting to him. So I got my chance, and I got my model with me. So the first wooden model, and I was telling Bud about what had occurred, and that I'd got these at close views. It was like somebody put binoculars in front of my eyes, and I believe I've had an out-of-body experience. And Bud says to me, no, it wasn't an out-of-body experience. It was alien telepathy. They were images placed in your mind from them on board the craft. I thought, well, that's a bit far out, isn't it?
Like a download.
So I wrote about it. I put it in with all the other weird things that were going on, but I didn't take it on board as such. But I kept it on the back burner, and I was still clinging to the out-of-body experience. But what happened then? With one of the smaller models of the triangle, I did a presentation to a Birmingham UFO group, Birmingham here in the UK in the Midlands. And afterwards, the host said to me, Dave Holden, that he had a case that was a bit similar. And it was a couple of guys who had seen a UFO, and they followed it. And it landed in a field, and it was quite a distance from where they were. And they stood on this gate watching the activity. And they said that some aliens got out of the craft. And then all of a sudden, an alien's face was right in front of his face. He'd like telepathically come across the field, right up to him, and told him he shouldn't be there and he's got to go. And I thought, well, that's similar to what had happened, but not quite the same. But then as coincidences go, within 2 weeks, I got an email from America, from a guy in Connecticut. Now, he's never spoke to anybody. He's not spoken to MUFON or anybody like that. And he's only spoken to me because he'd seen me on the web talking about the close viewing with a guy called Richard Hall. So anyway, the email started off by saying, just like you, I've had 3 images placed in the mind when I was having a close encounter with a triangle here in Connecticut. And he gave me the story about it, and this triangle, he'd seen it, it came down really close. And he said, as he was looking at it, trying to remember all the detail for later on, he said, all of a sudden, he was right next to it, like 6 foot away from it. He said the first view was some pipe work, like refrigerator pipes on the outside. The second view was a ball of light or plasma, and the third view he thinks was actually inside the craft.
Wow. Oh wow.
And when I read that, I'd also been listening to a lot of Dr. David Jacobs' work with abductees, where they talk about telepathy. You know, telepathy crops up all the time, but they were saying that sometimes they put pictures in your mind rather than words. Now, in my naivety, I always thought that telepathy would be words going backwards and forwards, but sometimes it can just be images. And that's when the penny dropped. I thought, yes, Bud Hopkins was right all those years ago. He's correct. They did put images in my mind, and that made more sense then for 2 reasons. One was, if it was an out-of-body experience, when it went from the nose to the side view, why did I not see the craft roll? Why was it like instant pictures? You would have thought that if it was an out-of-body experience, you'd be seeing it in real time moving around, rather than 3 instant images. So that would make sense. And then the other reason was that I couldn't fathom out. The other 3 occupants of the car, my wife, my daughter, and my mother-in-law, were not having these extra paranormal experiences. It was only occurring to me. So I figured out the day at the river with the invisible creature that they must have done something to my mind that night. And obviously what they did was to give some telepathy. And in doing that, it sort of opened up a little bit of my mind to let these other things come through.
Right.
And then I realised that these other things that I was seeing and hearing must be here all the time. without us knowing because we don't perceive them.
Yeah.
But I was allowed to perceive them for a while, and now it seems to have faded away again. But that was that was quite a revelation when I got that email to say that it was telepathy, and I believe now that's possibly what did take place.
Makes sense.
But we don't know. It's a science we don't really understand. I mean, for 20 years, I thought I'd had an out-of-body experience. But now, for the last 4 years, I think it was telepathy that took place.
Yeah. Right.
So we need to keep an open mind still. It could turn out to be something completely different. I don't know.
Yeah.
More mysteries.
So that's pretty much the story of the encounter and the weird things that happened afterwards. Now, when I was writing the book and people were getting in touch with me, I was asking them if they'd had any other paranormal experiences, and there were more people saying yes than no, which didn't surprise me in a way because I knew that was the case. So I actually got a whole chapter on people who have had UFO experiences and paranormal experiences, because I do believe the two are connected.
Yeah.
They're intertwined somehow, and I think that's because of the dimensions, basically.
Do you think it's interdimensional? You still stay in maintain that it possibly is interdimensional, Colin?
I do, yes, yeah. But we have to keep an open mind, don't we? Because we don't really know. I mean, I do believe it's dimensional because of the residue that was left from me from the telepathy and seeing these other things, and the amount of people who've had paranormal experiences and then UFO experience. It just seemed to be that connection. But there is a possibility, once we learn to do this, maybe we could pop across to another dimension, travel a little bit, come back out again, but rather than being here, be like 300 light years away.
Yeah.
That might be a possibility. So if that's the case, then maybe some people, some humanoids or whatever in our universe who are far more advanced than us have already figured this out. So we may have a mixture of proper dimensional beings and possible beings from our own universe which are using dimensions to travel here. I said it's a bit of a wild guess, but I don't know. I wouldn't discount it.
Yeah.
Right.
Discount anything with this weird subject. It's so strange.
Exactly.
That's right. That's very true.
But it is real. I mean, it did blow me away, you know, with all my work I've done over the years, to find out all of a sudden that not just the fact that aliens exist, but paranormal stuff as well, you know, the ghosts and all that sort of thing. They're all there. You know, what people have seen in history. Incredible.
Yeah, it's the subject of the UFOs as it goes on. We're still trying to figure it out. Over here in the U.S., you know, we're trying to we're trying to figure out what it actually is. We've got the government involved, and I know Matt and I talk all the time. Supposed to, have you been watching what's been going on with the Senate and Arrow and all that?
Bits of it, yeah. But they were saying that the latest ones wasn't worth watching, to be honest.
Yeah,
It really.
Nothing came out of it.
Right.
yeah.
They don't know what they are, do they?
They're
I mean, there must be somebody somewhere who knows what they are.
Right.
Well, yeah, that's our hope. I mean, you know, we're MUFON members, and we meet monthly, and people come in and they tell different stories about their experiences, and there's something there. We just, I just wish that I think the government knows a lot more than they're telling.
Yeah, but maybe they don't know all of the facts, which is why they're not telling.
Right.
Could be. Yeah.
It's such a strange subject. I mean, one of the things people often say is that, it's TR3B. But when you work in the aircraft industry, I mean, when you manufacture a craft, you keep it pretty much the same all the time because you know it's going to work and it's going to fly. So like the F117, the Nighthawk and the B2 Spirit, they kept the same design.
Yeah.
They made like 100 of each. Didn't make a lot of them.
Right.
But you don't go making big design changes on every aircraft that you manufacture.
Yeah.
Not just because of the spare parts that you're going to need to keep in stock, but the maintenance of all these craft and the maintenance crews. It's going to be a logistical nightmare.
Yeah.
So if you take my book, there's 130 accounts.
Yeah.
No two are exactly the same.
Right.
Sizes vary, the lights vary, the colours vary. And that's just scratching the surface. There's got to be thousands of these triangles around.
Right.
So if these were man-made, you would need an enormous fleet of spare parts and people just to keep them all flying. And if you multiply that by the amount of triangles around the world, then it's just...
It's crazy.
You also wouldn't be flying them at rooftop height in heavy populated civilian areas.
Right.
Yeah.
Doing that, that's happening all the time.
Yeah, you're not turning them sideways so you can see the lights more if you're trying to keep that a secret.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's absolutely incredible.
Well, it's almost as though it divulges itself to you on purpose. And that, I don't know. It just seems like you were a vehicle by which, to convey this
witness it,
thing,
yeah.
because almost like it knew.
Yeah.
It did. I mean, it was waiting for us. I believe it was waiting for us.
Right.
I believe we happened to be in the right place at the right time. And the strangeness about the whole event and nobody else being involved when there should have been really some other people seeing it. It was just us for that brief time. The closeness of the encounter, the detail that I was shown, and then the close viewing, the images. They were all like, if you like, to get me to build the model and to eventually write the book. So
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I've often thought, why did it occur? Because these are really intelligent, advanced creatures. They're in charge of all this, not us.
Yeah.
Right.
So why did they do this to us? What was the point? And the only thing I can think is that this is some sort of part of this subtle disclosure by writing the book, doing these podcasts and making the model.
Exactly.
And see how it builds up over the next couple of years and see if it gets a bit more mainstream. But yeah, I do believe it happened for a purpose. What I've also thought, I asked my wife to draw what she saw. Now, she didn't see the craft materialise, but she's seen the lights when we drove towards them. Now, she drew 3 red lights in a perfect equilateral triangle. There's no way we could have seen that from the angle that we were coming up.
Right.
Not when it was mixed in with the 4 on the back and a bit of white in the middle, because we didn't know what we were looking at all when we first approached it. And then when we stopped next to it, to the rear of it, and by the way, it was that low. If it had tilted from the middle, it would have struck the ground. So the rear end stayed where it was, and the nose came up. That's how close it was to the ground.
Wow.
And like 100 feet away from us. So a couple of months later, I asked her to draw again what she saw in the lights. And again, she drew 3 red lights in a perfect triangle. So then it came to me, like, this is just an idea, that the little one that was waiting for us, it was making sure that we'd seen it. There was no doubt. And it tilted itself up to expose the lights a bit more, I believe, unless they were looking at us as well as us looking at them. And that was almost like a bait, because if you remember, I said when we got out of the car, there was a large craft going away from us in the distance, the size of a football pitch.
Right.
So if you rewind that a bit, there's a possibility that when we were staring at the little craft next to us, the big one came over the top of the car. And what my wife drew was the underneath of the mothership, the large ship.
Right.
She drew 3 red lights in a perfect triangle. There's no way that the other 3 of us could have seen anything like that from that angle. So was the little one like the bait? Was it an ambush?
Yeah.
Possibly. I don't know.
Could be.
I think consciousness plays a part in sightings. I've had a few sightings myself, and consciousness definitely plays a part in it. It's not just that, us observing it and, seeing it, but there's a little more to the aspect, downloads, experiences from that.
Yeah, and I've often thought as well, that if telepathy did take place and they'd connected to me, when we pulled forward and the hedge blocked the view, I actually said to myself, if it's going to go, now would be a good time.
And it did.
And it wasn't a good time. It was a bad time.
Right.
Being my mother-in-law, we would have got on board, honestly. My wife and my daughter weren't so keen, but we were.
Right.
But the thought was, now would be a good time. But it'd be a good time for them, not for me. Were they still in tune with me? Did they hear me say that?
Did they know that?
Clear off?
Yeah.
Was that the key for them to disappear? Because it left us without seeing it disappear, which is a shame, such a shame.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I say, my mother-in-law, who was 72 that day, she would have got on board. With me, I would have got on board. I was so excited.
Right.
I want to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my mother-in-law passed away, unfortunately, during COVID, of old age, not from COVID itself. Right? But when they cleared out a bedroom, they found in the wardrobe all the paper cuttings on paranormal stuff, on ghosts and things like that.
Oh wow.
So
Yeah.
she was a very private woman, but unknown to us, she was obviously well into the paranormal stuff
Right.
before the UFO event.
Yeah.
So maybe she'd had some experiences along the way with ghosts and things. So maybe it was for her that night.
Yeah,
I don't know.
that's what I was going to say. Maybe
Yeah.
it was, maybe she was the conduit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll never know, will we? Unless they tell us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I have noticed this paranormal thing. There was a program here in the UK not long ago, last week on Blaze, and it was it Louis Elizondo?
Yep.
Elizondo?
Yeah.
Luis Elizondo. Yeah.
He was starting to say that they were thinking that these things are dimensional, and they said on that program that a lot of people who have close encounters go on to have other paranormal experiences, and they've got a name for it. They call it the hitchhiker effect.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I've never heard that before, and to see that, I think I've just written a book where I've talked about that, where I now think it's dimensional, and you get these extra paranormal activities after you've had a close encounter. And there you are on the telly saying the same sort of thing. I think this is starting to become mainstream now. People are starting to realise what's
Coincidence?
Yeah.
going on. That's right, yeah.
Do you watch Skinwalker Ranch?
I do, yes. Yeah, I've been
Yeah.
watching that. Yeah.
What do you think about that show?
It's obviously been dramatised a lot for the
Yeah.
public,
Entertainment.
but
Yeah.
there's definitely some weird stuff going on down there.
Yeah.
They did have a film of an orb the other night flying around. That was quite interesting.
They have the
I've seen a few of
hitchhiker,
those.
the hitchhiker effect on that.
Yeah.
They discuss that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Travis Taylor, discusses
Travis
that.
Taylor.
Yeah, Travis Taylor. Yeah, and he talks about might be the experiences with that type of thing where they go home after
Yeah.
the show and things are happening at the house that they kind of
That's
bring
right, yeah.
with them.
I mean, people always talk about portals, don't they? So this is like a portal to a dimension rather than an extraterrestrial craft.
Yeah, it's a different
thousands
kind
of light years to get here. That's all covered in burn marks and re-entry marks and all that sort of thing. The craft that we saw was spotless.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
like it just come out of the car showroom. It was beautiful.
Yep.
Got a mark on it. It was the most amazing piece of engineering that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible.
Yeah, that's an amazing design.
Yeah, that's a great model.
The
Yes, yeah. It's as close as you're going to get to the real thing. This
Right.
one, it's absolutely blows me away. This one with the liquid surface, you can see
Yeah.
and the beam on there,
that is incredible.
and the real.
Yeah,
real
I almost-
form, it's not always seen.
3D.
I visualize seeing that the black type water just literally just kind of moving when you see that.
Yeah, which is what I think made it look like it was alive, like it was organic.
Right.
A few
Right.
people talk about that.
Yep. There's
Now, if you go through the book, I mean, there's 130 different sightings in there. So what I did, I thought I'd go through and pick up on some of the things that people were saying. That's the one there.
Everybody.
It's a great book. We both
Yeah,
have
it's
We
a lovely
it.
both
book.
got it.
Oh.
Pick it up, guys.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
a great
definitely.
read.
Yes,
It's an
definitely.
amazing book. I love it.
So I would have said the triangles, they're black or dark grey, and I think the majority of the time they are that sort of colour.
Right.
But in the book, people talk about grey, black, the normal colours, plus orange, silver, gold, white, blue, dark brown, and green. So all those different coloured triangles have been seen.
Right.
And the lights, again, I would have said red and white. Sometimes they reverse. The white light in the middle becomes red and the corner lights become white. You see
Right.
that sometimes.
Yeah.
But people also talk about green and blue, yellow, orange, bronze, purple, and pink. Quite often as well, a beam coming down from the centre light as well. That's been seen a few times. And noise. I mean, we didn't have any noise over the noise of the car engine of the Fiesta that we was in. But that doesn't mean it wasn't making any noise, but we just couldn't hear any
Yeah.
noise. But other people report like a dull hum, a low
Oh,
humming noise, like a transformer, or buzzing, droning noise. And somebody described it as sucking like a vacuum cleaner.
Yeah.
And the sizes, they all vary from quite small craft, 6 foot across, to football pitch size craft.
Yeah.
And often girders and pipes like on the back of a refrigerator
Yeah.
seen
Yeah.
on these craft. People feel pressure as well when they get close enough. Shimmering like tin foil. I thought that was a good description. And rippling, black tar. And the movement, that was an interesting one, because our craft, when it floated a bit, it floated, like I say, like a submarine underwater.
Right.
And people talk about it being fluid and gliding. and floating like it's underwater. Sometimes it's seen going blunt end first as well. So that's quite an interesting observation. But people always talk about the way it moves. It's not moving like a Harrier jump jet would do in real time. It's floating and gliding and drifting around, which is pretty exciting.
That's crazy.
That's amazing. That's
So
great. Go ahead.
Yeah,
sir.
there's a couple in here that got my attention that I always like to talk about or read about, because I just thought they were quite interesting. So if you don't mind, I'll just read you one of these.
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
A case, a guy called Charles B. December 2011. So I guess in his scheme of things, it's not that long ago.
Wow.
Out with his daughter, they'd seen a light and they were trying to chase it in the car. And then he says, we both reasoned it maybe was a helicopter, but there were no strobes and no noise. Somewhere between Cleesby and Manfield, we lost sight of it as it got too low. We looked for the object, but decided to give up and turn back home. As we drove home back along the A67, I said, let's look down by the river at Low Coniscliffe. With hindsight, I think they told me it was there. There always just seemed to be this paranormal connection and consciousness connection between people and UFOs.
Right.
They go on to say that after driving down the track to the river, the craft was probably about 300 feet above the ground. It was huge, at least 1,000 feet across. The lights at the apices were dim yellow-orange, and there was a dimmer orange light in the body towards the back. I got out of the car and stood staring at the triangle. There was total silence. I could no longer even hear the traffic from the nearby A1M motorway. The body was black, and it blocked out the stars, but I could see stars around it and also a nearby farmhouse on a hill. It also seemed to block out the breeze. I don't know whether I got closer to it or it to me, but I seemed to be right underneath it. I could see black channels etched into the underside of it, which would make you think of a docking mechanism. It seemed to be made of slate or graphite material, very dark grey and a smooth matte texture. I could feel the presence in my whole body, and a dental implant was vibrating in my mouth.
Oh, no.
I could see the channels covered the underside of the craft. They are probably 6 feet across and of a similar depth. And this is the amazing bit. I raised my hand and touched part of the craft's body between the channels.
Oh, wow.
I was terrified and even thought it could harm me, but I did it anyway. I brushed my fingers over it and then put my entire palm on it. It felt like a hard kitchen worktop with a matte finish, but it was not cold. The next thing I remember is my daughter shouting me to come back to the car. She didn't want to get out. And that was the end of his sighting.
Wow.
But that is like, can you imagine 1,000 foot wide triangle?
Yeah.
That low
close,
that you can touch it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that also shows the skill of the navigators on board the craft, whoever was steering the craft, to be able to get that close without squashing the bloke underneath.
Right.
Absolutely amazing.
Tearing up the road. Or...
Yeah.
There's another one I'll quickly touch on, won't take long, because I found this one quite amazing. This lady phoned me a couple of times to go through what had happened. So I think all of the accounts in the book are genuine. I don't believe any of them are making these things up. I mean, why would they?
Why would they?
Make this up to get ridicule?
Yeah.
So she says, this is in when was this one? 1983 in Nottingham in the UK here. Said, my friend was 3 years older than me and we were unemployed at the time. We decided to go and visit Dad's property, a 10 to 15 minutes walk away, and we arrived at about 8 to 9 p.m. The house had a football pitch just beyond the back garden with wild space surrounding it. The weather had been dry all day. When we came to leave late that night, we glanced over to the football pitch via an entrance. We both spotted a mist and a triangular-shaped pyramid, so we decided to go and investigate. The pyramid object was the size of a council house and not quite on the ground, but hovering just above the ground by about a foot or two.
Oh, wow.
The pyramid looked to be made of glass and was transparent. I could see swirls of coloured gas inside, yellow, blue, green, in fact like a rainbow. As they approached the pyramid, it backed away from them. But when they backed away, the pyramid returned to its original position. The craft then became solid for a while. In fact, Lindsay described it as metallic with Egyptian hieroglyphs on all the sides. One of these hieroglyphs was a man with a bird's head carrying a long spear. Lindsay and her friend became nervous and decided to go home, where they believe they lost between half to 3/4 of an hour in time. Lindsay's friend plucked up courage and went back to the football pitch, but the triangular pyramid and the mist had now gone. I asked Lindsay if she had any other experience, and she replied, I've seen an odd few lights throughout my life, and as a young child, I had an experience where I was playing with the toys with a ghostly old lady that came and sat next to her. So that I found that to be an amazing encounter because she phoned me twice, all excited to talk about this.
Right.
The fact that this craft had got hieroglyphs, Egyptian hieroglyphs on the side of it. That's just amazing. So it's tying ancient history into modern ufology.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does kind of look like the Egyptian.
It did.
Some of those.
Yeah. Even
you know,
the one
designs.
decided,
You know,
Just incredible.
for sure.
a foot from the ground. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I
amazing.
believe our craft was probably only 50 feet from the ground.
Right.
And like I say, if it had tilted from the middle, it would have struck the ground, I'm sure. That's why the rear end stayed where it was and the nose floated up in the air like I say, like a submarine underwater.
That's insane.
So it's been quite a roller coaster ride, I have to say, over the last 24 years. I've tried to leave it alone at times, but it always comes back.
Yeah.
To the point you can see now, like, I'm surrounded with podcasts and books. And
Yeah.
it's not going away anytime soon.
Do you make the UFO show tours too? Do you go speak or do any presentations there?
I find it very nervous, to be honest. I'm not really, not something I relish doing. Even doing these podcasts, I always get very nervous before the start.
Right.
I was
So I want
nervous
to get
having
going.
you on. I go,
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
I mean, people keep describing me as a researcher and an author, but I know I've written a book, but I'm just an ordinary bloke who's just happened to have written a book about my experience and information. I wouldn't class myself as an author. I haven't really got any plans of doing another book, not unless I get thousands more sightings coming to me, people coming with new stuff.
It's a good
I think this will probably be the only one I do, to be honest. You know, it's got my sightings now. I can't keep going over old ground.
Right.
So I'm really pleased I've done it.
How are sales of the book, Colin? Is it moving pretty good?
I won't know until the end of this month, which is pretty much tomorrow, I think. So
Right.
Yeah.
I'll have a word with my agent, Philip Mantle, and we'll see how they're going. But I hope so, mainly because of the amount of interest that's been shown in it. So I've been doing a lot of podcasts, and I've got a few more to come up yet.
Yeah.
And everybody's been so positive.
Keep buying it.
Yeah.
It's available on Amazon.
Yep.
Amazon.com. It's available as it's a paperback, hardback. There's a Kindle version, and there's also an audio tape as well. But
Oh,
with the audio one, you don't get to see
there
all
is
the-
an audio.
yeah. You have to see
There's an
you
audio,
have to see the
yeah.
images.
Yeah.
Yeah, for those
You miss out.
listening to the podcast on Omni or Spotify or Apple, wherever you listen to, check us out on YouTube so you can see Colin's models.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
they're
definitely.
amazing. You know, definitely.
They are amazing
very
because
well
they are
made.
real. They're genuine.
Yeah,
genuine
right.
sighted. And they are an exact scale model of a genuine.
Of the
UFO.
sighting. Very cool. All right, you about ready to wrap it up?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. It's been great chatting to
Thanks for having.
Yeah.
You know, thanks for coming on. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
you. Well, I hope all your listeners enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And if you've had an experience with a triangle, then buy the book.
Yep.
I say that because I wish the book like this had been around when I had my experience. Because, you know, there was nobody to turn to.
Right.
I mean, it just
Yeah.
blew me away. I wasn't expecting it. And there was not a lot of information around at that time. There certainly wasn't a book along these lines. And if I'd have got a book like this, it would have calmed me down. It did take me quite a while to calm down. I would say probably at least a year, if not 2 years. You know, I was just quite hyper for a while.
I'm sure.
I'm okay with it all now. You know, it's all.
Some
Fine.
people just want to get their story out.
That's
know,
it.
it's I've got another gentleman that's had some experiences
That's
that
simple.
came in. He wanted to come on the show, but he wanted to talk to me personally before he came on about these experiences. He'll be on in a couple weeks, and he says, I feel better just being able to talk about it. You know, 'cause
Yes.
it was incredible.
I've had a lot of people contact me just to chat.
To talk.
Yeah.
So I want to talk to somebody who's had an experience
Yep.
because in the early days, a guy said to me that there's two types of people in this world: one who's had an experience and those who haven't.
Yeah.
And I thought
Yeah.
at the time that sounded a bit arrogant, but over the years, you tend to realise that's true. I mean, once you've had an experience, you absolutely know that this is real, and you know
Yeah.
that most of the other people coming talking to you have seen it as well. they're not making it all up.
No. There's no reason.
And to talk to somebody who has seen it, it does make you a bit more comfortable with it all. But those who haven't actually seen it, it's very difficult for them to take on board the fact that they are here and what it involves. So there does seem to be two types of people: those who haven't experienced, those who haven't. But I do admire people who, in the UFO world, are searching for craft and are trying to see them. They go out all night long on night watches with the binoculars.
Yeah,
they never get to see anything.
Yeah,
but they keep at it, and then you get people like me who are not interested, just driving along, and
then boom.
Yeah, I see how it is, Colin. I'm looking all night, all the time. I don't see anything, and you're just driving along.
And then boom.
Yeah,
that's how it happens.
Your whole paradigm shift.
It is, yeah, definitely a paradigm shift.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and wrap it up. Thanks for
listening.
It's
been great.
Thanks for listening to the latest episode of the Alien Probe Podcast. We welcome comments, questions, or requests to alienprobepodcast@gmail.com. Visit us on Facebook. Check out our website at alienprobe.net. Twitter and Instagram at alienprobepod. Like and subscribe. YouTube, Alien Probe Podcast. Thank you, Colin Saunders. There's the book right there. Everybody pick it up. Get the audio version if you're not a big reader. You'll really enjoy it. Thanks, Colin, for coming on.
I'm sure all your listeners would enjoy it once they get a copy of it. So thanks for having me on, Doug and Matt. I've enjoyed it tremendously.
Thanks to meet you. And move on, Matt. Thank you very much. Take care.
Great.